Good evening and welcome. Tonight we're not going to talk about the internet you know. Not the one that lives in your pocket, that delivers your groceries, or connects you to the world in an instant. We're going to drift back in time, through the layers of code and commerce, back to the quiet, humming rooms where this vast digital universe was born. The internet feels like a solid, permanent place. But it's not. It's an accidental city built on forgotten pathways, strange coincidences, and the dreams of people who imagined a connected world long before it was possible. Is a place haunted by digital ghosts, the first words ever spoken, the first communities ever formed, the first battles ever fought. So find a comfortable place. Let your mind settle. We're going on a journey to find those ghosts. We're going to listen to their stories, from the grandest visions to the smallest, most unbelievable accidents that shaped our world. There is no need to keep track, no test at the end. Just let these stories wash over you, like whispers from a time when the world was just learning to connect. Before the first wire was laid, before the first computer whirred to life, the internet was an idea, a dream of a universal library, a collective mind. These are the stories of the people who saw the future long before it arrived. Our journey begins not in Silicon Valley, but in 1930s Belgium, with a man named Paul Otlet. Otlet had a goal that was as simple as it was impossible: to collect, organize, and share all the world's knowledge. He co-created a massive analog search engine called the Mundanium, a repository of over 16 million index cards, photos, and documents. But his vision went further. In 1934, he sketched out plans for what he called a mondothèque, or a world brain. It was a home workstation, a desk with screens and a telephone, that he imagined would connect to his universal library. A user could request information, and the librarians would retrieve it, sending it back through telegraphs and television signals. It was a vision of a networked world, complete with multimedia and remote access, decades before the first computer was even built. That's the Memex, something with full time. In 1945, an American scientist named Vannevar Bush, who had helped oversee the development of the atomic bomb, was wrestling with a different kind of explosion, the explosion of information. He worried that the sheer volume of human knowledge was becoming too much to manage. In an article for the Atlantic Monthly, he proposed a solution, a theoretical device he called the Memex. It was a desk that would store books, records, and communications on microfilm. But its true genius was in how a user would navigate it. Bush imagined that a person could create links, connecting two different documents together to form an associative trail. You could then share these trails with others, who could add them to their own Memex. He had, in essence, imagined the hyperlink, the fundamental building block of the World Wide Web, as a way to mimic the associative pathways of the human mind. The galactic network. The idea of a connected world took another leap in August of 1962. A psychologist and computer scientist at MIT named J.C.R. Licklider wrote a series of memos about a concept he called the galactic network. He wasn't just thinking about accessing information. He was thinking about human interaction. He envisioned a global network of computers that would allow people to not only access data and programs from anywhere, but to collaborate and communicate in new ways. His vision was so influential that it directly inspired the creators of ARPANET, the government project that would become the Internet's direct ancestor. Licklider's memos were the philosophical blueprint for the social, interconnected web we know today. 4. The precursor network, telex. Before these digital dreams, a physical network was already circling the globe. It began in Germany in the 1930s as a military tool, but soon spread worldwide. It was called the telex network. Instead of computers, it used teleprinters. These clattering machines could send and receive text messages over standard voice telephone lines, routed by modified switches. It was a text-based, global messaging system that connected businesses and governments for decades. It showed that a worldwide network for instant communication was not just possible, but immensely useful. 5. The birth of the modem. For computers to talk to each other over the vast distances of telephone lines, they needed a translator, a device to convert digital data into sound and back again. That device was the modem, a name derived from its function: modulator, demodulator. But the modem wasn't invented for the internet, or even for computers. It was developed in 1949 by the US Air Force for a completely different purpose: transmitting radar signals over phone lines. It was only later, in the 1950s, that it was adapted for computers. First, for the Sage air defense system, and then in 1958 for commercial use. By allowing computers to use the existing ubiquitous telephone network, the modem made the dream of a widespread computer network economically viable. 1. The internet as we know it would have been impossible without this repurposed piece of military technology. Stace, sometimes brightest, world of experiences. The theory of packet switching. The old telephone network used a system called circuit switching. When you made a call, you created a dedicated, unbroken connection between you and the person you were calling. This worked for voices, but it was incredibly inefficient for computers, which send data in bursts. A new idea was needed. In 1961, an MIT graduate student named Leonard Kleinrock published a paper on a revolutionary theory: packet switching. The idea was to break data into small, uniformly sized blocks, or packets. Each packet would have an address, and they could be sent into the network to travel independently, finding their own way to the destination, where they would be reassembled. This meant no single dedicated connection was needed. A network could be decentralized, robust, and handle data from many users at once. It was this theory that convinced the architects of ARPANET that a decentralized network, one that could even survive a nuclear attack, was feasible. On October 27, 994, the website Hotwired, the digital offshoot of Wired magazine, went live. And with it came the first banner ads. One of them, purchased by the telecommunications company AT&T, was a simple black banner with a cryptic message. Have you ever clicked your mouse right here? You will. It was part of AT&T's futuristic You Will campaign. The ad was mysterious, it was intriguing, and it was incredibly effective. In an era before ad blindness, an astonishing 44% of the people who saw the ad clicked on it. It didn't take them to an AT&T sales page. Instead, it took them on a virtual tour of 7 of the world's greatest museums, a demonstration of the web's power to transport you anywhere. It was an ad that offered an experience, not just a product, and it marked the beginning of the commercial web. The first online pizza order. Also in 994, another commercial first took place, this time in Santa Cruz, California. Pizza Hut launched an experimental website called PizzaNet. The interface was simple, a web form where you could select your toppings, enter your address, and provide your phone number. The first order ever placed was for a large pizza with pepperoni, mushrooms, and extra cheese. 35. The system was surprisingly complex for its time. The order was sent from the website to a central server in Kansas, which then relayed it to the local Pizza Hut. An employee would then call the customer to confirm the order before making the pizza. It wasn't necessarily easier than just picking up the phone, but it was a glimpse into the future of convenience. A future where, eventually, you could order almost anything with the click of a button. The gentle ambient music continues, providing the soft bed for the next chapter. Chapter 3. The Digital Campfire. The first online communities. Before the internet was a marketplace or a library, it was a meeting place. A digital campfire, where strangers from around the world could gather to talk, to argue, to share, and to build something entirely new: community. These were the first social networks, long before the term existed. The Bulletin Board System, BBS. From the middle of a blizzard, in Chicago, in 978, 2 computer hobbyists, Ward Christensen and Randy Suis, built a system in their home. It was called the Computerized Bulletin Board System, or CBBS. Friends could use their modems to dial directly into the computer and leave messages for each other, like a digital corkboard. This was the birth of the BBS. For the next 2 decades, thousands of these systems sprang up, run by hobbyists out of their basements and spare rooms. Each was its own tiny, self-contained digital island, a hyper-local community for sharing files, playing games, and, most importantly, talking to one another. Usenet, the worldwide discussion. While BBSs were isolated islands, another system was emerging that would connect them all. In 979, 2 graduate students at Duke University, Tom Truscott and Jim Ellis, created Usenet. It was a simple but brilliant idea, a distributed discussion system. There was no central server. Instead, messages called articles were passed from one computer to another, spreading across the globe in a vast, decentralized web. 40. Users could subscribe to news groups on any topic imaginable, from sci-physics to rec arts Star Trek. It was in the anarchic alt hierarchy, short for alternative, that the true, weird soul of Usenet flourished, with groups for every conceivable subculture. Usenet was a cultural engine, giving us terms we still use today, like FAQ, flame, and the first use of the word spam. 40. 22. MUDs, the first online worlds. In 979, another form of community was being born, one based not on discussion, but on adventure. It was the multi-user dungeon, or MUD. 3. These were entirely text-based virtual worlds, the direct ancestors of today's massive, multiplayer online role-playing games. You would connect to a server and read descriptions of rooms, characters, and monsters. You would type commands like "Go North" or "Attack Dragon" and interact with other players who were logged in at the same time. It was the first time people could inhabit a shared, persistent virtual space together, creating characters and living out digital lives in a world made entirely of words. 3. The Well, the influential salon. In 985, a different kind of community was founded in the San Francisco Bay Area. It was called The Well, which stood for the Whole Earth Electronic Link. Started by Stuart Brand, the creator of the Whole Earth catalog, The Well was envisioned as an influential online salon. It attracted writers, journalists, thinkers, and tech pioneers. Its defining principle was a simple disclaimer shown to every new user: you own your own words. This fostered a culture of deep, thoughtful, and accountable conversation. The Well was more than a message board. It was a tight-knit community where real-world relationships were forged. It was on The Well that discussions about digital rights and freedoms led directly to the founding of the Electronic Frontier Foundation, or EFF, a pivotal organization for Internet civil liberties. These early communities weren't just about technology. They were about profound human connection. Consider the story of Phil Gustafson. In 20, a San Jose newspaper wrote a story about a man who had died alone, his body undiscovered for some time. The story painted him as a recluse, unmissed and unmourned. But Phil's friends saw the article. They were his friends from Usenet, from a news group called Alt Folklore Urban, where they had all gathered in the early 90s. They had known Phil for nearly 2 decades. They had attended weddings and funerals together. They were a community that spanned the globe. They flooded the newspaper's comments section, testifying that Phil was not alone and would be deeply missed. They tracked down his estranged family to deliver the news personally, from people who cared about him. Phil's story is a powerful reminder that in the networked world, being physically alone is not the same as being truly alone. 25. IRC, the first global chat room. While Usenet and The Well were for asynchronous conversations, like leaving letters for one another, a new system emerged in 988 for talking in real time. It was called Internet Relay Chat, or IRC-3. Created by a Finnish student, IRC allowed users to join channels and type messages that would appear instantly to everyone else in that channel. It was the world's first global, real-time chat system, a massive, sprawling network of conversations happening all at once. It was the direct precursor to the instant messaging apps that would soon follow. 3. Pause and breathing wait, in parentheses. While these early systems were built by and for the technically savvy, one company had a different vision: to make the internet for everyone. It began in '95 as Quantum Computer Services, launching an online service called Q-Link, exclusively for users of Commodore 4 computers. 4. In 1989, it was renamed America Online, or AOL. 47. From the beginning, AOL's strategy was to be easy to use, fun, and affordable, in stark contrast to its more technical competitors. 48. Its killer app, as co-founder Steve Case believed, was people. AOL focused relentlessly on community, building features like people connection chat rooms, message boards, and eventually, instant messenger. Perhaps nothing captures the essence of the AOL era more than 3 simple words: "You've got mail." That iconic voice belonged to a man named Elwood Edwards. In 1989, his wife, who worked at the company that would become AOL, heard that they needed a voice for their new email notification. Edwards, who had a background in broadcasting, recorded a few phrases on a cassette tape in his living room. The company chose his recordings, and his voice became a cultural touchstone for a generation. A Pavlovian bell that signaled a new connection from the outside world. The ubiquitous AOL free trial CDs. How did AOL get into so many homes? The answer came on a shiny plastic disc. In 1993, AOL's chief marketing officer, Jan Brandt, launched one of the most aggressive direct mail campaigns in history. The company started mailing out floppy disks, and later CDs, offering hundreds of free hours of internet access. They were everywhere, in mailboxes, inside magazines, packaged with cereal boxes and fast food meals. 50. At the campaign's peak, it was estimated that 50% of all CDs being manufactured in the world had an AOL logo on them. 49. People used them as coasters, ornaments, and to scare birds from their gardens. 52. The campaign was relentless, and it worked. It was an on-ramp to the digital world for millions, a physical invitation to join the online community. 5. Parentheses. ICQ and the uh-oh sound. In '99, a small Israeli company called Mirabilis released one of the first standalone instant messaging programs for the internet. They called it ICQ, a play on the phrase "I seek you." It was a simple, revolutionary tool that let you see when your friends were online and chat with them instantly. It spread like wildfire through word of mouth. Like AOL, it had its own iconic sound, the simple two-note "uh-oh" that announced the arrival of a new message. For millions of teenagers in the late '90s, that sound was the heartbeat of their social lives. The unique user ID, the UIN. ICQ had another peculiar feature. It didn't identify you by a username. Instead, when you signed up, you were assigned a user identification number, or UIN, distributed in sequential order. This meant that the lower your number, the earlier you had joined the service. A 5 or 6-digit UIN became a subtle, powerful status symbol in the digital world, a quiet testament to the fact that you were there, at the digital campfire, from the very beginning. The music shifts slightly, becoming a little more upbeat and forward-moving. Chapter 4, Garages and Giants, the unlikely births of tech titans. Every empire has its creation myth. For the giants of the internet, those myths often begin in the most humble of places. A college dorm room, a suburban garage, a failing company looking for a new idea. These are the unbelievable and often comical origin stories of the names that now define our digital world. 3. Google's origin, backrub. In '99, two Stanford PhD students, Larry Page and Sergey Brin, were working on a research project. They had a novel idea for a search engine that would rank pages based on how many other pages linked back to them. It was a system for analyzing the web's backlinks. And so they gave their project a fittingly nerdy and slightly strange name, Backrub 58. The name Google, a fortunate typo. Backrub didn't last long. Page and Brin wanted a name that conveyed the immense scale of their mission to organize the world's information. They settled on Google, the mathematical term for the number followed by double zero zeros. The story goes that when a fellow student, Sean Anderson, was checking to see if the domain name was available, he misspelled it as google.com. Page and Brin liked the new name, and it stuck. One of the most valuable brand names in history was born from a simple typo. Google's first server was made of Lego. In its earliest days, Google ran on a shoestring budget. To house their first server, Larry and Sergey needed a cheap, expandable, and custom-fit casing for their collection of hard drives. Their solution was brilliantly low-tech. They built the server rack out of Lego bricks. The colorful, clunky server became a symbol of the company's early culture, playful, resourceful, and a little bit unconventional. The first Google Doodle. In August of 1998, Page and Brin decided to take a break and attend the Burning Man Festival in the Nevada desert. They wanted a clever way to let the few users of their beta search engine know that the whole staff was away and wouldn't be able to fix the servers if they crashed. So, they placed the simple stick figure logo of the festival behind the second O in the Google logo. It was the very first Google Doodle, an out-of-office message that became a beloved tradition of creative expression. The first Google Office, a garage. After receiving their first major investment, a $1,000 check from Sun Microsystems co-founder Andy Bechtolsheim, Page and Brin needed to move out of their dorm rooms. In September 1998, they rented the garage of a friend in Menlo Park, California. That friend was Susan Wojcicki, who would later become Google employee number and the CEO of YouTube. Their first office had clunky desktop computers, a ping-pong table, and a bright blue carpet. It was in this garage that the foundations of a global empire were laid. 3. Amazon's origin, Cadabra. Pause. In 1994, a young Wall Street vice president named Jeff Bezos decided to quit his job and start an internet company. His first idea was an online bookstore. He incorporated the company with a name he thought was magical, Cadabra, as in abracadabra. 7. A few months later, his lawyer misheard the name over the phone as cadaver. Bezos quickly realized the name had to go. He started looking through a dictionary for a replacement. He stopped on Amazon, the biggest river in the world. He planned to build the biggest bookstore in the world. It was a perfect fit. And as a bonus, A name starting with A would appear at the top of alphabetized web directories. Pause. Breathe. The regret minimization framework. The decision to leave a lucrative job to sell books out of a garage was not an easy one. To make it, Jeff Bezos created what he called the regret minimization framework. He projected himself forward to age 80 and imagined looking back on his life. He asked himself, would he regret trying and failing at this new internet thing? Or would he regret never having tried at all? He knew the answer was the latter. He would always wonder, what if? That simple mental exercise gave him the clarity to take the leap. The first item sold on Amazon. From that garage in Bellevue, Washington, Amazon.com went live in July 1995. The very first book ever sold was a dense, academic text titled Fluid Concepts and Creative Analogies, Computer Models of the Fundamental Mechanisms of Thought, by Douglas Hofstadter. It was a fittingly intellectual, if not exactly best-selling, start for the company that would become the everything store. The order beep. In the very early days, the Amazon team set up a computer to ring a bell every time an order was placed. It was a satisfying, tangible signal of their progress. But within a few weeks, the orders were coming in so frequently that the constant ringing became unbearable. They had to turn it off. It was one of the first signs that their small garage operation was about to become something much, much bigger. Yahoo's origin. Jerry and David's guide to the World Wide Web. Before search engines could crawl the web, finding anything was a challenge. In 994, two Stanford graduate students, Jerry Yang and David Philo, started a hobby project to keep track of their favorite websites. They organized the links into a hierarchy of categories, creating a browsable directory. They called it, simply, Jerry and David's Guide to the World Wide Web. 3. It was a human-curated card catalog for the digital age. As the list grew, it became one of the most popular starting points for navigating the web, eventually becoming the portal known as Yahoo. For eBay's origin, the Pez dispenser myth and the broken laser pointer. The founding myth of eBay is a charming one. The story goes that its founder, Pierre Omidyar, created the site in 995 to help his fiancée trade her collection of Pez candy dispensers. It's a great story, but it was invented by a public relations manager years later to make the company seem more appealing. The truth is much stranger. The very first item Omidyar listed on his new auction site, then called AuctionWeb, was his own broken laser pointer. To his astonishment, it sold for $4.83. He contacted the winning bidder to make sure he understood it was broken. The buyer's response has become legendary. "I'm a collector of broken laser pointers." It was in that moment that Omidyar realized he might be onto something big. MySpace's origin, a Friendster clone. In 2003, the dominant social network was a site called Friendster. But it was slow, buggy, and had strict rules, like blocking accounts that didn't use real names. A few employees at a marketing company called eUniverse saw an opportunity. They decided to build a better version, mimicking Friendster's best features, but making it faster, more reliable, and more open to creativity. Working at a frantic pace, they built and launched the first version of MySpace in just 10 days. Everyone's first friend, Tom Anderson. Anyone who signed up for MySpace in its heyday remembers their first friend. It was Tom. Tom Anderson, one of the site's co-founders, was automatically added as the first friend to every new user's profile. It was a simple, brilliant piece of social engineering that made the site feel welcoming from the moment you joined. His simple, smiling profile picture became one of the most recognized faces on the internet, the default friend to millions. Twitter's origin, a side project at Odeo. In 2001, a San Francisco podcasting company called Odeo was facing a crisis. Apple had just launched its own podcasting platform built into iTunes, effectively making Odeo's business model obsolete. The founder, Evan Williams, told his employees to break into groups and brainstorm new ideas. One of those ideas came from a quiet engineer named Jack Dorsey. He proposed a simple service that would let you share short status updates with a small group of friends via SMS text messages. It was a small side project, a last-ditch effort from a dying company. The original name, Twitter. The project's original code name was Twitter. The name was inspired by the photo-sharing site Flickr, which had popularized the trend of dropping vowels. It also evoked the 5-character length of American SMS shortcodes. The name was meant to be short, simple, and mobile-friendly. The full name, Twitter, came later, defined as a short burst of inconsequential information, which the founders felt was a perfect description. The first tweet. On March 2nd, 2000, Jack Dorsey sent the first public message on the new service. It was as simple and functional as the service itself. Just setting up my Twitter. 7. Like the first ARPANET message, it was not a grand pronouncement, but a simple statement of action. A quiet beginning for a platform that would one day host the thoughts of presidents and revolutionaries. 47. GeoCities, the original digital neighborhood. Before social media profiles, there was the personal homepage. And for millions in the late 90s, the place to build one was GeoCities. Launched in '95, GeoCities was a web hosting service that organized its users' pages into virtual neighborhoods based on their content. You could build your site in Hollywood if it was about movies, Area 5 for science fiction, or Wall Street for finance. It was a sprawling, messy, and wonderfully creative digital suburbia where everyone was an amateur web designer. Armed with blinking text, animated, under-construction GIFs, and auto-playing MIDI theme songs. It was the first time millions of people carved out their own personal space on the web. Chapter 5. Rebels and Regulators. The battles that forged the web. The internet was not built in a peaceful vacuum. It was a frontier, and like any frontier, it had its conflicts. It was shaped by rebels who pushed its boundaries, by corporations that fought for control, and by events that forced a naive and trusting community to grow up fast. These are the stories of the battles that forged the web. 48. A Morris worm. The end of innocence. On the evening of November 2nd, 988, the internet was a small, trusting community of about 0,000 computers, mostly at universities and research labs. That evening, a graduate student at Cornell University named Robert Tappan Morris unleashed a program he had written. He claimed his intent was harmless: to create a worm that would travel across the network and discreetly count how many machines were connected. But he made a critical coding error. The worm was supposed to check if a computer was already infected before copying itself. But to avoid simple countermeasures, Morris programmed it to reinfect a machine 4% of the time, even if it was already infected. This small error had catastrophic consequences. The worm began to replicate uncontrollably, infecting computers again and again, slowing them to a complete halt. The aftermath of the worm. Within 24 hours, the Morris worm had crashed an estimated 10,000 computers, roughly 10% of the entire internet. It caused millions of dollars in damages from downtime and cleanup efforts. The event was a profound shock to the system. It was the internet's first major security crisis, the end of its age of innocence. In the aftermath, Robert Morris became the first person to be convicted under the new Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. And the U.S. government, realizing the network's vulnerability, funded the creation of the first Computer Emergency Response Team, or CERT, at Carnegie Mellon University, the world's first cybersecurity fire department. The rise of hacker culture. The Morris worm brought the idea of the hacker into the public consciousness, often as a purely malicious figure. But in the 980s, a complex culture was developing. Groups like the Legion of Doom in the United States and the Chaos Computer Club in Europe were forming. They were explorers of the new digital world, driven by curiosity. They believed in the free flow of information and saw it as their duty to expose security flaws in corporate and government systems. The famous Hacker Manifesto, published in '98, captured this spirit, describing a world of electron and switch, where the curious were judged not by their appearance, but by their skills. Pen and end. Five. Hacktivism and Anonymous. Section break. As the internet became more political, this hacker ethos evolved into hacktivism. No group embodies this more than Anonymous, the decentralized collective that emerged from the image board 4chan in the early 2000s, 82. With their iconic Guy Fawkes masks and slogan, "We are Legion," Anonymous has launched cyber attacks against targets they deem corrupt. They organized DDoS attacks, overwhelming a website with traffic until it crashes, against the Church of Scientology, and later, against financial companies like PayPal and Visa after they cut off donations to WikiLeaks. 83. They represent a powerful, chaotic, and controversial force, using the tools of the internet as a form of digital protest. Period break. 52. The Napster Revolution. A college student named Sean Fanning created a program that would change music forever. It was called Napster. It was a peer-to-peer file-sharing service, but it had a crucial innovation: a central server that indexed all the MP3 music files available on every user's computer. Suddenly, you can search for almost any song in the world and download it directly from another user for free. It was a magical experience. Within a year, Napster had tens of millions of users, and the music industry was in a state of panic. 53. Metallica versus Napster. The music industry saw Napster not as innovation, but as mass theft. The fight came to a head in 2000 when the heavy metal band Metallica discovered that a demo of their unreleased song, I Disappear, was circulating on Napster. They filed a landmark lawsuit, becoming the public face of the industry's war against file sharing. Rapper Dr. Dre soon followed with his own suit. The legal battle was bitter and public, pitting artists and record labels against a new generation of digital natives who saw information, including music, as something that wanted to be free. Ultimately, the courts sided with the industry, and in July 2000, Napster was forced to shut down its network. The first browser war, Netscape versus Microsoft. In the mid-1990s, the gateway to the World Wide Web had a name: Netscape Navigator. Born from the team that created Mosaic, the first popular graphical web browser, Netscape was fast, innovative, and utterly dominant. By 1995, it had over 90% of the browser market. It seemed unstoppable. But the company's success had awakened a sleeping giant in Redmond, Washington: Microsoft. At first, Microsoft had largely ignored the internet, but Netscape's explosive growth and co-founder Mark Andrean's bold claims that the browser would reduce Windows to a set of poorly debugged device drivers forced Bill Gates to act. In May 1995, he sent a now-famous internal memo titled "The Internet Tidal Wave." In it, he declared the Internet the most important development since the IBM PC, and reoriented the entire company to match and beat Netscape. The browser war had begun. 5. The Giant E prank. The rivalry was fierce, but it also had moments of playful absurdity. On the night of Internet Explorer 4.0's launch in October 1997, a group of Microsoft engineers drove down to Silicon Valley. In the middle of the night, they snuck onto the lawn of Netscape's headquarters and left a present: a 10-foot-tall glowing letter E, the logo for Internet Explorer. It was a cheeky, audacious prank, a declaration of war planted on the enemy's doorstep. 57. Netscape's retaliation. The Netscape employees who arrived for work the next morning were not amused, but they responded with their own brand of humor. They promptly knocked the giant E over and then carried their own company mascot, a giant statue of a green Godzilla-like dinosaur named Mozilla, and placed it on top of the fallen logo. They attached a sign to Mozilla that read, "Netscape 72, Microsoft 8, a reference to the latest market share figures, the bundling strategy, and antitrust suit. The pranks were fun, but Microsoft's real weapon was its monopoly. With the release of Windows 95, Microsoft began bundling Internet Explorer with its operating system for free. Netscape, which charged for its browser for business use, couldn't compete. Why download a browser when one was already built into your computer? Microsoft also made deals with computer manufacturers to make IE the default browser, effectively cutting off Netscape's air supply. By 999, IE's market share had soared past 90%. The tactics were so aggressive that they led to a massive antitrust lawsuit against Microsoft by the US government. But by then, it was too late for Netscape. The phoenix from the ashes, Mozilla. As its defeat became inevitable, Netscape made a final, desperate move. In 998, it open-sourced its browser's code, releasing it to the world for free. It then created a non-profit organization, the Mozilla Foundation, to steward the code and foster a community of developers to build a successor. It was a long, difficult process, but from the ashes of Netscape, a new browser was born, Phoenix, later renamed Firefox. Released in 2004, Firefox was fast, secure, and innovative. It reignited the browser wars, challenging Internet Explorer's monopoly and paving the way for the diverse, standards-based web we have today. The music becomes lighter, more curious and whimsical. Chapter 1: The Weird Wide Web, the Birth of Viral Culture. As more and more people came online, something strange and wonderful began to happen. A new kind of culture was emerging. It was playful, absurd, and self-referential. It spread not from the top down, but from the bottom up, passed from person to person through email forwards and message boards. It was the birth of the Weird Wide Web and the creation of the Internet meme. 0. The Dancing Baby. In '99, a 3D animation of a baby dancing the cha-cha began to spread across the Internet. It was originally created as a sample file, skbaby.max, to demonstrate the capabilities of a 3D animation software called Character Studio. One of its creators, Michael Girard, later admitted he found the animation disturbing because of its uncanny movements. Tweaked the file and started emailing it to his colleagues. From there, it escaped into the wild, spreading via email chains and becoming one of the very first internet memes. Its fame grew to the point that it was featured on the TV show Ally McBeal as a recurring hallucination, a bizarre manifestation of the main character's ticking biological clock. It was likely the first time a piece of internet culture had crossed over so prominently into the mainstream. The hamster dance. Parentheses. In 1997, a Canadian art student named Deirdre Lacarte entered into a friendly competition with her sister and a friend to see who could generate the most web traffic. 03. For her entry, she created a simple page on the free web hosting service GeoCities. It was a tribute to her pet hamster, Hampton. The page consisted of nothing but 4 different animated GIFs of dancing hamsters, repeated in rows, over and over. 03. For the soundtrack, she used a sped-up 9-second audio clip from the song Whistle Stop from the 1973 Disney movie, Robin Hood. 03. For months, the site got almost no traffic. Then, in early 999, it suddenly went viral, gathering millions of hits. The hamster dance, with its intentionally misspelled name, became an inescapable phenomenon of the early web. 03. All your base are belong to us. In 992, the European version of a Japanese video game called Zero Wing was released for the Sega Mega Drive console. The English translation of its opening cutscene was spectacularly bad. Lines like, "Somebody set up us the bomb," and "For great justice," were nonsensical and awkward. The scene ended with the villain, Cats, declaring triumphantly, "All your base are belong to us." For years, it was an obscure piece of gaming trivia. Then, in the late 90s, the dialogue was discovered and posted on an internet forum. In 2000, a user named Jeffrey Raymond, part of an online comedy troupe, created a flash animation and a high-energy techno remix of the phrases. The "All Your Base" meme exploded across the internet. It was photoshopped into images, hacked onto road signs, and even quoted by mainstream news outlets. It was a celebration of English and one of the most dominant memes of the early 2000s. 07. Peanut Butter Jelly Time. In 2002, another flash animation took the internet by storm. It was a simple, pixelated animation of a banana dancing with maracas. The soundtrack was a relentlessly catchy song by a group called the Buckwheat Boys, which consisted of little more than the repeated phrase, "It's peanut butter jelly time." The combination of the absurd visual and the infectious, repetitive song was mesmerizing. A dancing banana became an icon, appearing in TV shows like Family Guy and becoming a staple of early viral culture. 4. The rise of flash animation. Many of these early memes were made possible by a single piece of software, Macromedia Flash. Flash allowed creators to make vector-based animations that had incredibly small file sizes, perfect for the slow, dial-up connections of the time. It was also easy to learn and relatively cheap. This led to a golden age of internet animation. Independent artists and small studios could create and distribute their work to a global audience without a gatekeeper. It gave us legendary series like Homestar Runner, the surreal and creepy Salad Fingers, the interactive violence of Joe Cartoon, and the cartoon carnage of Happy Tree Friends. For a time, Flash was the engine of creativity on the web. The first YouTube video, Me at the Zoo. On April 23, 2005, a new video sharing website called YouTube saw its very first upload. It was not a polished production. It was a 9-second clip, shot by a high school friend of YouTube co-founder Jawed Karim at the San Diego Zoo. He's standing in front of the elephant enclosure. He looks at the camera and says, "All right, so here we are in front of the elephants. The cool thing about these guys is that they have really, really, really long trunks. And that's cool. And that's pretty much all there is to say. And that's it. The first video on a platform that would come to host billions of hours of content was a simple, mundane, and utterly authentic moment. Ask Jeeves. Before Google's stark white page and powerful algorithm came to dominate search, there was a more civilized option. Launched in '99, Ask Jeeves was a search engine personified by a friendly, well-dressed butler named Jeeves. The site encouraged you to ask questions in full, natural sentences, As if you were speaking to a real person, Jeeves would then try to find the answer. It was a charming and user-friendly concept, but it relied on human editors to match questions to answers. It couldn't keep up with the algorithmic power of its rivals, and Jeeves was eventually retired, a ghost of a gentler, more conversational era of the web. 7. The screech of the modem. For a generation, this was the sound of the future, the screeching, chaotic symphony of a dial-up modem connecting to the internet. It was the sound of a handshake between your computer and a server miles away, a negotiation happening over your telephone line. It was often a frustrating sound, the soundtrack to slow-loading pages and sudden disconnections if someone in the house picked up the phone. But it was also a sound filled with anticipation. It was the audible gateway between the offline and online worlds, a ritual that signified you were about to step into cyberspace. ASL. In the anonymous, text-based world of early chat rooms and instant messengers, the first question was almost always the same. 3 letters, ASL. It stood for age, sex, location. Efficient way to get the most basic information about the disembodied text on your screen. It was a standard piece of digital etiquette, a relic of a time when online identities were fluid, and everyone was a stranger, just a few keystrokes away. In 2007, users on the image board 4chan started a prank. They would post a link promising something exciting, like a trailer for a new video game. But the link would instead lead to the music video for Rick Astley's 987 hit, Never Gonna Give You Up. The bait and switch was called Rickrolling. It was simple, harmless, and endlessly adaptable. The meme exploded in popularity, becoming one of the most enduring and widely recognized pranks in internet history. A shared inside joke for the entire web. In 20, a commercial for a local taxidermist in Ojai, California, became an unlikely viral sensation. The ad, created by the comedy duo Rhett and Link, featured a series of shots of lifelike stuffed animals in the wild. A person would react as if the animal were alive, only for the camera to reveal the deadpan face of the taxidermist himself, Chuck Testa, who would declare, "Nope, Chuck Testa." The commercial's quirky, repetitive humor was perfectly suited for the YouTube era, and the catchphrase became an instant meme, a shorthand for something that looks real but isn't. I got the nab, the Good Times virus hoax. In 1994, a frightening email began to circulate. It warned of a new, devastating computer virus with the subject line, Good Times, 1908. The email claimed that simply opening the message would unleash the virus, which would not only erase your entire hard drive, but also send your computer into an nth complexity infinite binary loop. It was all, of course, a complete fabrication. There was no such virus. But the Good Times warning was one of the first great internet hoaxes. It spread rapidly through fear and a lack of technical understanding, teaching an early, valuable lesson in digital skepticism. Don't believe everything you read online. 9. Chapter 7. The Millennium Bug and the Panic That Wasn't. As the 20th century drew to a close, a shadow loomed over the increasingly computerized world. It had a technical, almost quaint name, the year 2000 problem. But it was known to the world by a more ominous moniker, the Y2K bug. It was a story of a simple shortcut, a global panic, and one of the strangest, most anticlimactic nights in modern history. 72. The technical problem explained simply. The problem was born of thrift. In the early days of computing, data storage was incredibly expensive and limited. To save precious space, programmers adopted a simple shortcut. They recorded the year using only the last two digits. 97 became 7. 998 became 98. For decades, this worked perfectly fine. But as the year 2000 approached, a terrifying question arose. What would happen when 99 rolled over to do? Would computers interpret the year as 2000, or would they default to 900? The fear was that this simple ambiguity could cause chaos in any system that relied on dates, banking, air traffic control, power grids, even nuclear missile systems. 73. The media hysteria. The media seized upon the story with fervor. News reports painted nightmare scenarios of planes falling from the sky, ATMs spitting out cash, and a global economic collapse. Books with titles like The Millennium Bug, How to Survive the Coming Chaos, became bestsellers. NBC produced a made-for-TV disaster movie about the coming digital apocalypse. The narrative was compelling and easy to understand. A tiny bug in the code could bring modern civilization to its knees. Personal stories of preparation. For many ordinary people, the threat felt very real, and they prepared accordingly. People stocked up on canned food, bottled water, and generators, treating it like an impending natural disaster. Some withdrew their life savings in cash, worried that bank records would be wiped clean. One of the most unbelievable stories comes from a woman whose mother, convinced of a total societal collapse, not only stockpiled food, but also bought a live milk cow just to ensure her grandchildren would have fresh milk. Another man recalled joining a survivalist group that was training to recreate society after the inevitable Y2K apocalypse. The unseen army of programmers. While the public was panicking, a quiet, massive effort was underway behind the scenes. An unseen army of programmers, many of them nearing retirement, were pulled back in to tackle the problem. They spent years combing through billions of lines of archaic code, often in old programming languages like COBOL, searching for and fixing the two-digit date flaw. It was tedious, unglamorous work. Globally, it's estimated that governments and businesses spent between $300 and $200 billion to remediate their systems. A programmer's New Year's Eve. For many in the IT world, New Year's Eve 999 was not a night for celebration. They were on call, or in war rooms at their offices, anxiously monitoring their systems as midnight rolled across the globe, time zone by time zone. One IT manager for a state agency recalled going to work before dawn on New Year's Day to test everything. When he found that nothing had broken, he and his boss went to IHOP for a celebratory breakfast. A systems analyst in the UK spent the night in his office at the Liverpool docks, watching the fireworks over the river while on standby, just in case. The pranks. Of course, some couldn't resist a good prank. One family watching the Armed Forces Network overseas recalled their terror when, at the stroke of midnight, the broadcast cut to static. After 5 long seconds of silence, the feed returned with the newscaster shouting, "Just kidding. Happy New Year." Elsewhere, party hosts secretly flipped the main breaker to their house at midnight, plunging their guests into darkness and a moment of genuine panic before revealing the joke. What actually happened? The minor glitches. As midnight passed around the world, the apocalypse failed to arrive. There were no falling planes, no collapsing grids, but there were a handful of small, isolated, and often comical glitches. In Australia, some bus ticket validation machines failed. In Japan, radiation monitoring equipment at a nuclear power plant briefly went down, though no danger was posed. A video store in South Korea had its computer calculate that a movie rental was 0 years overdue, generating a late fee of over $7,000. And in Denmark, the first baby born in the new millennium was officially registered as being 0 years old. 79. The non-compliant headstones. One of the strangest side effects of the Y2K bug had nothing to do with computers. It had to do with headstones. For years, people who pre-planned their funerals would sometimes have their headstones engraved with their name and birth date, and the first 2 digits of their death year, 9W. But for those who unexpectedly lived past 999, this became a small, permanent, and rather awkward problem. It was a physical manifestation of the same short-sightedness that had caused the digital problem in the first place. Chapter 8. The Lost Worlds of the Web, a Digital Memento Mori. The Internet is a place of constant creation, but it is also a place of constant loss. Platforms that once felt like the center of the digital universe now exist only as memories, their communities scattered, their data lost. This is a journey through the lost worlds of the web, a reminder that in the digital realm, nothing is permanent. For a time, the web was a vibrant, chaotic, and deeply personal place. It was the era of GeoCities, where millions of people built their first homepages. These weren't slick, professional sites. They were digital scrapbooks, filled with passion and personality. They had blinking text, spinning GIFs, guestbooks to sign, and web counters that proudly displayed every visitor. They were organized into themed neighborhoods, creating a sense of a sprawling, quirky digital city. When Yahoo shut down GeoCities in 2009, a vast, unique archive of early internet culture was lost forever. The fall of MySpace. Before Facebook, there was MySpace. For a few years in the mid-2000s, it was the social network. It was a place of creative expression. You could customize your profile with backgrounds, songs, and glittery GIFs. You could meticulously curate your top 8 friends, a public ranking that could start real-world drama. It was a hub for music, launching the careers of countless bands. But after its acquisition by News Corp, the site became bloated with ads and slow to innovate. As the clean, uniform, and more adult-oriented Facebook rose, users began to leave MySpace in droves. The king of social media was dethroned. The final, tragic chapter in MySpace's story came in 2008. The company announced that due to a server migration error, every piece of content uploaded before 200 had been permanently lost. Over 50 million songs by 4 million artists, along with countless photos and videos, were gone forever. It was a digital cultural catastrophe, a stark and painful reminder of how fragile our online history truly is. An entire era of music and personal memories wiped out by a technical glitch. The ghost of Ask Jeeves. Paragraph. We remember a time when search felt more personal, more polite. We remember Ask Jeeves, the search engine that invited us to pose our questions to a virtual butler. You didn't just type keywords. You asked a question, and Jeeves, in theory, would find the answer. It was a charming interface for a less complicated web. But as Google's powerful algorithms proved more effective, Jeeves was quietly retired, a relic of a time when we still treated our computers with a certain formality. Paragraph. The silence of MSN Messenger. For a generation, online social life happened on MSN Messenger. It was a world of custom emoticons, screen names that were a constantly changing stream of song lyrics and cryptic emotional updates, and the ability to see what song your friend was listening to on Windows Media Player. And, of course, there was the nudge, a feature that would violently shake your chat window to get someone's attention. It was the digital equivalent of shaking someone's shoulders, and it was the soundtrack to a million teenage conversations. 85. The 6-second art of Vine. In 2003, a new app appeared that celebrated brevity. It was called Vine, and it allowed users to create and share 6-second looping videos. The constraint was a catalyst for a new kind of creativity. It gave birth to a unique style of rapid-fire, surreal, and endlessly quotable comedy. It launched the careers of a new generation of internet stars. But in 2020, its parent company, Twitter, shut it down, leaving a void that would soon be filled by TikTok. For its fans, Vine was more than an app. It was an art form, gone too soon. Netscape Navigator, the fallen king. We remember Netscape Navigator, the browser that for many was their very first window onto the World Wide Web. In the mid-90s, it was the undisputed king, the standard-bearer for a new age. Its defeat in the first browser war was a cautionary tale about the power of monopolies. Today, it exists only as a memory and as a ghost in the code of its descendant, Mozilla Firefox. The pain of pay-per-minute internet. It's hard to imagine now, but there was a time when every minute you spent online cost money. Dial-up services like AOL often had pricing plans that charged by the hour or even by the minute. This created a constant, low-level anxiety. You would log on, quickly check your email, and log off, terrified of racking up a huge phone bill. It was a completely different way of experiencing the internet, not as an always-on utility, but as a precious, metered resource. The Argos catalog, the analog Amazon. Before one-click ordering and next-day delivery, there was another way to browse a world of products from your home. For many in the UK, it was the Argos catalogue, a massive, heavy book filled with thousands of items, from toys to electronics to jewelry. You would spend hours circling the things you wanted, then go to the store, fill out a small paper slip, and wait for your item to appear from a mysterious back room. It was a slow, tangible, and deeply nostalgic form of retail therapy. Before WhatsApp, before SMS, there were pagers. These little plastic boxes, clipped to your belt, would beep, letting you know someone was trying to reach you. The message was usually just a phone number you were supposed to call back. But a secret language of numeric codes soon developed. 4-3 meant I love you. 4 was for information. It was a primitive form of texting, a one-way broadcast that was a status symbol of the 90s, a sign that you were important enough to be reached at a moment's notice.